Dr Nandipha Magudumana's bail hearing will continue in the Bloemfontein Magistrate's Court this morning. Last week, Magudumana's lawyer, Frans Dlamini, said the state's strong opposition to her bail application was not in the interest of justice. Magudumana faces charges of fraud, corruption and assisting an inmate to escape from prison. Earlier this year, she was arrested in Tanzania with her boyfriend, convicted rapist and murderer Thabo Bester, who escaped from the Mangaung Correctional Centre in May last year. SABC News reporter Chriselda Lewis joins us live now with the latest. Chriselda, good morning to you. I mean, a lot of attention really being focused on also just the demeanour of Dr Nandipha Magudumana and what we saw last week. So you can certainly talk to us about what that has looked like. But of course, what we're expecting to see take place this morning.
Well, that's right, Naledi. As you correctly pointed out, Dr Nandipha Magudumana's bail application continues at the Bloemfontein Magistrate's Court this morning. Of course, in a startling turn of events last week, as you would have seen, Magudumana basically said that she did not intentionally go on the run with escaped rapist and murderer Thabo Bester. She basically said that she was forced by Bester to get into a vehicle and flee the country with him, also claiming that threats were made against her and she was basically forced to comply, this against her wishes. However, what we also saw was the prosecution rubbishing that or throwing cold water on those allegations over those claims that she made. But basically, for example, detailing this loving relationship between Bester and Dr Nandipha Magudumana. You would recall that assertion that was made in that affidavit last week that she'd basically been forced against her will really raised eyebrows because, for example, you would have remembered that at the time that Dr Nandipha Magudumana had appeared in court alongside Thabo Bester, many South Africans were frowning upon the manner in which the two had reacted towards each other, certainly seeming quite cozy together. And then, of course, now we saw this affidavit in which she says she was forced, against her will, to flee the country with Thabo Bester. Just going back to the history of that relationship, some of the things that were detailed by the state. For example, if we look at 2006, what the state says is that Magudumana and Thabo Bester had met basically for the first time. This was at Wits University. He had been studying theology while she was studying medicine at the time. And if we look at the other dates that have followed as well, in that they said that after they had met in 2017, Magudumana and Bester basically started dating, that this was at the time that he was in jail for rape and murder. Fast forward to about, I think it was 2020, they said. This is where the state says Bester proposed marriage to Magudumana, and in December of that year, lobola negotiations had basically been paid, and this is of course where the uncles would then go to the home of the bride-to-be, and this is where these discussions were held for lobola, and the sum of about 60,000 rand, we understand, had been decided. And the crux of what the state is saying at this particular point is that the claim that Dr Nandipha Magudumana is making at this particular stage does not hold any merit. You must recall one of the issues as well that also took center stage was the fact that this was an application, a bail application that was brought. And remember, the issue of Schedule 5 and Schedule 1, what the defense is saying is that the state did not bring any evidence to suggest that this application that was brought was not a Schedule 1 and was a Schedule 5. Remember, if we talk about Schedule 5 and Schedule 6, we're talking about offences that would relate to murder, attempted murder, or anything else that may be related to drugs. That is not contained in any of what is against Dr Nandipha Magudumana in this bail application bid. But the legal teams have already arrived. But just before we get to that, on the demeanour of Dr Nandipha Magudumana, you would recall, while that affidavit was being read out here in court, she started crying. And when certain assertions were also being made, she started shaking her head, seemingly in disagreement of what the state had been saying. The state also putting some of the other fraud charges allegedly being faced by Dr. Nandipha Magudumana, some relating to millions of rand that the state says are some of the cases that she is also facing. But certainly we're expecting that bail application to get underway or to continue here this morning. And I just want to very briefly, in this instance, in fact, we'll see if we're not able to advance with the legal teams a little bit later on. But of course, if you could take a look at the gallery here, of course, as usual, people have gathered here at the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court. And this is certainly where the interest in this particular case, Naledi, certainly has not waned. What we are likely to see today is the closing arguments that are expected to be advanced here this morning. And look, it's very likely at this particular point that we might have a decision on this bail application sometime this afternoon. And I think, once that decision is made, you would recall that if Dr. Nandipha Magudumana is facing a Schedule 5 offence, just to hypothetically put it that way, the onus then, of course, would be on her to advance why she should be granted bail in this particular aspect. But if she's facing Schedule 1, then this would certainly mean that the onus would be on the state to prove why she should not be granted bail in this particular aspect. But I can certainly tell you that all eyes are on this particular court on how this matter will go forward. Remember, we already come from the Bloemfontein High Court, where Dr. Nandipha Magudumana had indicated that her arrest in Tanzania was unlawful. It was a disguised extradition. It was not a deportation. Those are some of the issues that we also understand that the Supreme Court of Appeal as well, on that particular decision that was taken by the High Court, is also something that is likely to be canvassed or will be canvassed by her legal team at a later stage. But I can certainly tell you that we're expecting these proceedings to get underway. She's once again expected to be in court. Those closing arguments will get underway, and perhaps I would say, like slightly towards this afternoon, there's a high possibility that a decision on that bail might be made. Whether Dr. Nandipha Magudumana will be released on bail is something that we will certainly hope to hear by this afternoon. But of course, the legal teams, I'm going to try and see if my colleague Thabo Bester and I would be able to head towards that direction, perhaps where the legal teams are. I'm going to try and maneuver through this for just a moment and see if we're able to perhaps speak to them for just a moment. We'll try to head out towards court because the proceedings have not yet started at this particular time. Let's have a look outside and see exactly what is taking place. We'll move towards this direction here. I'm going to ask my colleague Thabo Bester to try and move towards that particular direction. I must apologize. The camera is often unstable as we move towards this particular direction. Once again, if you take a look at what is inside the court here this morning, these, of course, being some of the individuals. Just take a look there. That's where the state are currently in conversation with the legal team representing Dr. Nandipha Magudumana. We're likely to hear at this particular point, what is. I'm going to see if I can't try and bring in one of them. Just stay with me for just a second here. Live coverage, rolling coverage here on the SABC on, of course, the continuing bail application. Ntate Mutlawong. All right, let me see if I can't bring in the National Prosecuting Authority. Dr. Paladi, very good morning to you. Thanks indeed for your time. Hijacking you there just a little bit. The state, of course, hopeful in this instance. We're hearing that we're likely to hear possibly an outcome this afternoon. But do you think the state has advanced enough at this point to make sure that Dr. Nandipha Magudumana is not released on bail?
Yes, we do believe that it would not be in the best interest of justice for Dr. Nandipha Magudumana to be released on bail. That is why we are opposing her release on bail.
There's the issue of the schedule. That had been a bone of contention, in terms of the schedule of offences that she is facing. What the defence is basically saying is that not enough was advanced to ensure, or for the state to make its case, that this is indeed not a Schedule 1 application, but instead Schedule 5.
Well, the prosecutor advanced reasons as to why the matter should be a Schedule 5 bail application. So it's up to the court to decide whether the prosecutor is correct or if the defense lawyer is correct.
But you're hopeful?
We're hopeful that it's going to be classified as Schedule 5.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll try to move towards this direction and see perhaps if we're able to. You'd always see, obviously, a tight security, as always, here at the High Court, beg your pardon, the Magistrate's Court. I'm going to come towards this particular direction and see if we can't just get a quick word with Ntate Mutjawung, who is, of course, one of the lawyers that is representing Dr. Nandipha Magudumana. As you can see behind me, that's where the state is in conversation with her lawyers at this particular time. And I see they're headed towards that direction, possibly towards the direction of the magistrates' chambers at this particular time. But of course, these are instances where the two then, I would understand, in this instance, also deciding on the bone of contention that there was regarding whether this was a Schedule 5 or a Schedule 1 application, because this is quite important in the instance that you would know, as I indicated, on that Schedule 5, the onus then would be on Dr. Nandipha Magudumana to prove why she should be released on bail. And if it's Schedule 1, those are the issues that had been canvassed in court the last time. And the expectation, of course, as usual, is that Dr. Nandipha Magudumana will come through from the holding cells right there at the bottom. And I'll just walk you through. This is the court that we're seated in at this particular time. And as usual, this is where the gallery is, and she will, of course, emerge right from here at this particular point. But certainly the bail application, the expectation this morning is that it will continue. We're very much likely this afternoon to hear whether Dr. Nandipha Magudumana will be granted bail or not. So we'll bring you live proceedings from here. Viewers can also catch the proceedings on the SABC's YouTube page, but high interest here this morning after, of course, the defence had advanced its defence and the reasons why Dr. Nandipha Magudumana should be granted bail. And, of course, the state saying it is opposing that and that they believe that what they've advanced so far is enough in this instance to ensure that she remains behind bars, of course, until that next appearance where we're expecting all of those in this particular matter to appear in court in October. But for now, all eyes on this bail application this morning as it continues. A possible outcome or decision on bail this afternoon. We'll have to wait and see.